Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Authentic Talks. You won't be disappointed. I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with the author of the #1 best-selling book, Reality Unveiled, which has been called one of the most transformative spiritual books in recent times. He also is a highly successful online entrepreneur in multiple arenas. You guys, I want you to get ready to welcome Ziad Masri to the show. Authentic Talks is all about authentic conversations. This show is all about growth, love, respect, success, mind, body, and spirit. If you're looking to grow and become your authentic self, then this is the podcast for you. And I am your host, Shanta. Welcome to the show. Hi, Ziad. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Shanta. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you please share with our audience who Ziad is?
Sure. So my name is Ziad Masri. I'm the author of the book Reality Unveiled. That's how most people probably know me. It's a book I didn't plan on being an author. I wrote it because it was like a lifelong, probably at that point, it was about 15 years or so of spiritual searching and just kind of seeking truth. And there was some profound personal experiences, some mystical experiences, and a lot of research. And eventually I decided to just kind of put it out there. At first, it wasn't supposed to be a book. I wanted to write a blog post, just share freely with people. And then when it became 50 pages, I thought, okay, this is more than a blog post. And so ended up becoming a book. And then, as things have it, it ended up becoming a bestseller, and then Audible bought the rights, and then it got translated a few different languages, and it's just been kind of happening on its own, which is something that I've seen happens when you follow your heart, and synchronicities just start really occurring. So that's the book. And then recently I transitioned full time into teaching people spirituality and the various different aspects of it. So then I created YouTube channel. So that's the SoulHub YouTube channel and SoulHub.com website, where I share a lot of free teachings with people. So that's basically in a nutshell.
Wow, that's really awesome. I've seen this video that you have out, and it's really, to describe it would be, it's like, let love lead the world.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like it's about right?
Yeah, so basically the whole gist of the video, and for anyone listening, you can just find out on my YouTube channel. Again, you just go youtube.com/soulhub to check that out. But the whole point of the video is tackling this issue that we have in the world, where we seem to have been conditioned and taught that to solve any problem, we have to fight against it. So there's, the war against cancer, the war against poverty, the war against drugs, the war against sickness, the war against everything, right? And it seems like that's the only way we think that we can fix things or heal things. Where in truth, whenever we're coming with that energy of waging a war against something, it's an energy of resistance. And by nature, that means there's an energy of fear and a belief in lack built into it. And so what occurs, even if you seem to fix something externally on the outside, you are planting a seed that will create more problems, and you will never truly heal the root cause. And so the whole point of the video is to talk about how love is actually the most powerful force in the universe. And we're not talking here about like romantic love. We're talking about unconditional love, the source of consciousness, and how if we come from that energy, that's where the true change in the world is going to occur. That's the only change. And then, the video cites some actual studies that they've done on meditation, where people have done mass meditation, and it's reduced worldwide crime rates and accidents and things like that. And the reason that's possible is because, in truth, physical reality, in a sense, is an illusion of physicality. The truth behind it is this interconnected consciousness, and that's who we are at our core, and we're very powerful, limitless beings. And when we meditate with love and peace in our heart, that actually changes the world on an energetic blueprint level. And it doesn't mean just being passive and sitting there meditating. What happens when you get into that state is that from that stillness and from that state of consciousness, inspired ideas come for actual action in the world also. But this action does not have these negative consequences. It's inspired action, and it's much more effective and efficient. So that's kind of the whole gist of the message.
Wow. There was this meditation recently that people
The
did.
global meditation for
Yes.
coronavirus. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had sent that out to, like 20,000 people on my list to really, and got a pretty good response, and a lot of people joined in and did that. So that was great to see.
Yeah, we did that too.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I think there's definitely over 1 million people doing that. Just from looking at how many different groups, it really went mainstream. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome too.
Yeah.
What is a spiritual awakening? We hear it so often now. To the point where I don't know if everyone, when they say it, are they saying the same thing?
Yeah, I definitely don't think people are saying the same thing, and that's fine. That's normal. I mean, there's very few terms that people use in that way that they'll end up being kind of abstract and a bit vague, and people have their own definitions. Of course, I have my own definition of it. And to me, so a lot of people will talk about spiritual awakening from the sense that it's when they wake up to understand the true nature of the world, to realize that, oh my God, the elites have been ruling this world and all this kind of stuff, and to wake up from that. And I think that's a small aspect of it, but that's not what I call true spiritual awakening. Other people call spiritual awakening when you have mystical experience, and if you've had something that kind of shows you the truth of your being, then you're awake. And again, that might be part of it, but I don't think that's the full thing. So to me, spiritual awakening is when it can happen suddenly, it can happen gradually. I would say for the vast majority of people, including myself, it's a gradual process. And it's a process of waking up from the illusion of personhood, is the best way I can say it. So basically what I mean by that is that we are all so conditioned to believe that we are this body, we are this mind, and to believe that, that voice that's always talking inside our heads, that's us, right? And those are all our thoughts, when in reality, that's a bunch of programming from early childhood, from society, from teachers, from parents, from genetic lineage, a lot of just conditioning and programming, literally like a software program that has a bunch of beliefs imprinted into it. I mean, if you think about it, where did most of your beliefs come from? A lot of people go, well, I thought, well, you didn't really think of most of your beliefs, and I'm talking, including myself, everyone. We're so conditioned with so many beliefs, and they actually create actions. So a lot of our lives are actually programmed by how we got conditioned, especially early on in life, and even genetically, biologically, and so forth. Even the human body filters out so much of actual reality, and causes us to act in a certain way with our emotions and our thoughts that are actually not so much free will. It's literally repetitive patterns. That's why you see people attracting the same type of relationships or issues or problems. So it's literally a pattern. And so spiritual awakening is when we start waking up to the fact that we are something that is much greater than this body, mind, vehicle, let's just call it. And that something that is much greater is what in science can be called consciousness, and in spirituality can be called spirit. And and the best way to describe it, because obviously it's just not something that can actually be defined in words, it's far beyond words, but the best way to describe it that makes sense to most people is that it's this formless awareness. So it doesn't have form. It's not something that has a shape or size or something, right? It's formless, but it's an awareness. It's a direct perception. And the reason why you are not the mind and your thoughts and all that is because you're aware of them. right? So how could you be aware of them if that was, what is it that is aware of them, basically? If you were just the mind, that voice inside your head, how could it be aware of itself? That's like a, and the eye, it can't see itself unless, it's seeing it, the mirror, but it can't see itself directly, right? Or a scale. You can weigh a lot of things with a scale, but the scale can't weigh itself. It's because it's one thing. So if you were your mind, if you were your thoughts, you would not be able to be aware of them. There has to be some greater aspect that is aware of the mind, aware of the body. And that is who you truly are in truth. You are this kind of formless awareness. Now, that might seem like not a big deal, except when you start discovering the qualities of this consciousness, let's just call it now for ease. And the qualities are this peace, love, joy, bliss. Why? Because it's limitless. It's not limited to a body. It's not limited to a mind. It's this limitless field of energy, if you want to kind of make it less abstract. And this is not some theoretical thing. I mean, many people, including myself, have experienced this directly through mystical states, through altered states of consciousness. And once you experience it directly, it's the truth, because it's so much more real, I guess you could say, than what you're experiencing now. It makes this seem like almost a dream. You know what I mean? Now, having said that, you're still, obviously, part of you still human. So that's why I call it like you're both human and divine. You're the intersection of the two. But all of our problems come in when we're so identified with just being a person, and all of our problems and so forth. So spiritual awakening really is this gradual movement away from believing and acting and living as if we're just a person, and more towards living from this state of consciousness, higher consciousness, a state of presence that is out of that mind stream, the thoughts in the head that create all your problems, that's always stuck in the past, that's always projecting a future, either desires or fears or worries or whatever. And in this state of peace and joy and bliss and love that is a reflection of your true nature as consciousness. So that's what I actually call spiritual awakening. To me, it's a much deeper term than is often discussed.
Wow, I love it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think that's the first time that I've heard someone describe it with such great detail like that. So yeah, it was described on a whole nother level, that's my understanding of it as well.
Great.
It's not like, just get out. Like, I hear a lot of people talking about get out of the matrix, get out of the matrix. And some people are receiving that mess. When I hear that, I don't take that literally as in I need to pack up my stuff, go live in the middle of nowhere, and have no connection to anything, where I'm totally disconnected from YouTube, television, like everything. And I know a couple people that did that.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you, because I think that's mostly an escape. Now, there's a good balance. It's good to lessen our exposure to these things because they are of a lower vibration, of our lower consciousness, and they could suck us in. Having said that, though, the real work in spiritual awakening is not escaping to some higher consciousness and spirit so you can bliss out. The real work is to actually embody it and bring it into the world. And that's with the relationships, that's inside of society, that's with all the challenges of how everyone normally lives. That's much harder. If you can go to a cave and meditate by yourself for 10 years and be very peaceful, but try bringing that into the middle of a city and work and relationships and all that, that's your real test. So I completely agree. Plugging out of the matrix does not mean just leave society and go, sit in the wilderness. Now, having said that, I think, rarely some individuals are called to do that, and that's okay. It's not that it's necessarily wrong. What I'm saying is that for most people, I don't think that's going to be their true calling. And for most people, the way to actually plug out of the matrix, the real matrix, is your mind. That's the real matrix. All this other external stuff, is a reflection of your internal state. So if you can be in the middle of everything, you could be, in the middle of a crazy concert and TVs everywhere and everyone's negative. But if you are plugged in to the truth of your being, you can be radiating peace and actually affecting them versus them affecting you. So plugging out of the matrix to me is actually dropping out of the mind stream, out of that thought stream that creates all your problems, and down into the spiritual heart where you can connect with your true nature. That's and doing it more and more in everyday life. That's really how you get out of the matrix.
I love that. I like you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's so true. Like, because it would be if millions of people just started getting up.
Yeah, it's not going to be really helpful to society, right? Now, it would be helpful in one way, which is that if they can keep their consciousness high, because we are all interconnected, they would help lift the vibration of the planet in a way. But I think it would be more helpful to do that while living within society and directly impacting people and being exposed to different relationships and interactions and embodying that light and that truth in your interactions. Of course, that's much more challenging, but I mean, I think that's where the highest service can come from.
Definitely. I agree 100%. Can you talk a little bit about shadow work and what exactly is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the shadow is a term that was coined by the great psychologist Carl Jung, and I think he gets overshadowed by Freud, but I think personally I think is much more brilliant. But I think he really understood everything to the deepest levels. So the shadow is really the part of us that we have repressed or suppressed into the unconscious. Everything we judge and feel shame about and hate about ourselves is the shadow. We push it into the unconscious. We don't want to feel it. All the things from childhood all the way up till now that we didn't know how to deal with, we didn't know how to cope with, the feelings that we didn't want to feel, the pain that we didn't want to experience, and we just pushed it down into the recess of the unconscious, and that's the shadow. Now, the reason why the shadow is very important is because it actually is what is living your life without you realizing it. And what I mean by that, and that's for all of us, what I mean by that is, you know how like people get triggered, right? Like let's say something happens, you get angry, or whatever it may be, or you've experienced fear and all that. What's usually occurring, and a lot of times you'll notice that sometimes like it's very overblown as compared to what actually happened. Like maybe someone cut you off a little, and sometimes someone will have road rage, or someone said a little remark, let's say some little remark, and you get so hurt and deeply offended and upset, and maybe you lash out at them or whatever it may be. I mean, we all have a million.
And everyone else is like, what the heck just happened? Why is or he acting that way?
And we've all experienced that, right? We've seen it with others, and we've done it ourselves, where others are like, what the hell's wrong with you? So, and so that is really the reason why you get these overblown things. And that's kind of the not so subtle example. That's the really direct overt example of the shadow, is because we have this repressed material inside, and it has its own energy. And so when something, let's say, happens on the outside, if it has any resonance with the energy that is repressed in the shadow, it'll trigger that inner stuff, right? Let's just call it the inner stuff, right? It'll trigger it because it'll have this energetic resonance with it. And that stuff will come gushing up to the surface because you haven't looked at it, you haven't healed it. And what does this thing want to do? You can almost think of it like an entity, and any entity just wants to survive. And how does it survive? It needs to feed on energy of its like, right? Energy that it resonates with it to continue its survival. And so the way it does that, for instance, let's say you have this repressed anger and something triggers that, and it comes up and it wants to feed itself so it can survive inside of you as more anger. So what does it trigger? A very angry response from you. So you, let's say, get very angry. And of course, often what that happens, it creates a backlash of anger from the environment, from someone else, and from whatever it is back towards you, or just even that anger itself gets you so fuming that it it really starts sparking all these thoughts of anger, right? And then that creates more emotions, and it just starts feeding itself, and until it finally calms down. And so then what you're essentially doing is you are acting and behaving and making choices that is not really your free will. It's just this buried trauma inside that is causing you to act like this, and it's so unconscious. Often you don't know why you're acting like that. Have you ever had this feeling like, why do I keep doing that, even though I really promised myself I never would do that again? It's such a destructive behavior, but you keep doing it and you keep doing it. That's why it's the shadow. It's stuff that's unconscious, and the unconscious is much more powerful than the conscious. So when it comes up, it basically takes a life of its own. Is essentially what I'm trying to say. And so shadow work is inner healing work that heals the shadow and essentially releases these repressed emotions and thoughts and feelings and so forth, so that they don't control your life anymore. And the more you release of them, the freer you become. Of course, the happier you become, and the less reactive you become, because there's less stuff down there to get triggered. And then, of course, you can become much more centered and much more at peace with what's happening on the outside. Now, this too, of course, is usually a very lengthy and gradual process, because we have so much stuff. And, depending on people's belief systems, if you believe in things like past lives and things like that, there's a lot of that, karma and trauma from, other lives, other dimensions, a million different things, all in, the being. And so there's a lot to work through, is essentially what I'm trying to say, on the one hand. On the other hand, the great news is that you can clear big chunks at a time if you're dealing with it properly.
Who does that? Can someone do their own shadow work, or do
Oh,
they
for
have
sure.
to
Yeah,
actually?
I've been doing my own shadow work for years, and I can give a couple different methods that I think are very helpful. Some of the most powerful methods. So one of the most powerful means of doing shadow work is a general term that has different facets to it, but it's called conscious breath work. So there's different types of breath work. There's holotropic breath work. There's a man by the name of Wim Hof, who's called the Iceman, and he has his own type of breath work. There's other types. So anyone could just go to Google, look up conscious breath work, and find the type that basically resonates with them. But what conscious breathwork does is using the breath in a conscious manner, and it's usually, what I mean by conscious manner is usually it's usually deeper and faster. That's typical, but it doesn't have to be. But that's a typical way to do it. And what it does, for some reason, some unexplained, mysterious reason, no one has really been able to answer. When you use the breath in a conscious way like that, it actually can it can go into the unconscious and bring up repressed emotions. And we're talking from a physical level. It's like actual emotions that are actually lodged in the cells. It's like cellular memory of traumas that you have not resolved, right? And so the breath has a way of bringing that up. Now, when it brings it up, it's not pretty. You can break down crying. You can feel this pain. You can feel emotions you don't want to feel. But that's where it takes courage. When someone truly wants freedom and really wants to heal, then they'll do what it takes. And it comes up. And, I've done various different types of breathwork sessions, and some of them are super intense. I remember the first time I did holotropic breathwork. I mean, I hadn't cried for years. This was many years ago, but I hadn't cried for years. And I broke down crying for like 45 minutes straight. But it was such a healing crying. There was so much. And I didn't know why. That's one thing you have to understand. You don't need to know why. You don't necessarily need to have memories actually pop up. You don't need to understand. This isn't like psychoanalysis where you go talk about it for 20 years with a therapist, right? It's not to say that there's no benefit in that at all. Some people need that, so I'm not putting that down. But what I am saying is that there's much more efficient ways to do this type of thing, and this brings a lot of stuff up, and you don't need to know what it is necessarily, but it can really heal. And the healing comes, just to make this clear, the healing comes from bringing the stuff up into the light of awareness. So Carl Jung had this amazing quote, and I'll paraphrase it here. I don't remember the exact one, but basically he says, you don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light. You become enlightened by making the darkness conscious. And that's huge, because
Yes.
a lot of times in the spiritual community, in the awakening community, we hear about this whole idea of, oh, just be love and light and, you know, butterflies and rainbows. And it's a little, you know, it's a little
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know, a little superficial in my view. It's just about, oh, just put on a happy face. But it's not about that. There is pain inside. There is darkness inside. It's about acknowledging it, but coming from a place of your true strength, of your true being, which is actually, you know, in physics, if you look at quantum physics, it's actually light. That's why it's called darkness and light. And another name for it would be unconditional love or compassion, or whatever you want to call it. But if you bring up your dark stuff into that light of awareness and you hold space for it with unconditional love, you accept it, you allow it to be there, and you allow it to express itself, even if it feels very uncomfortable, instead of wanting to get rid of it and wanting to reject it, which is actually the, I would say, the intuitive thing. You do the counterintuitive thing, which is you hold space for it and you just feel it, and it's almost like a loving parent, you know, just kind of gently softening towards this pain. For whatever reason, that heals it, that releases it. The way I experience it whenever I do this is I literally just get shudders in my whole body. Sometimes I get a shake, and I just literally feel the emotion releasing, and it feels beautiful. It feels really nice when that occurs. And so that you can do that through conscious breath work. You can do that literally simply through a process of just closing your eyes, and if you're feeling some whatever icky stuff, if you want to call it that, whatever you're feeling, some negative emotions, you, instead of trying to escape, which is our normal thing, we escape. How do we escape? We turn on the TV, we go watch a movie, we call a friend, we go eat something. These are all our escapes. We get on our phone. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of those things by themselves. Sometimes you just do them because they're enjoyable, right? And there's nothing wrong with them. But if you are doing them because you are feeling this uncomfortable feeling that you don't want to feel, and you just run for a remedy, then you're missing a wonderful opportunity to actually do this work. I think that's why this coronavirus situation is actually a blessing in disguise in a way.
Oh yeah,
because it's taken away people's escapes, like by force.
Yeah,
and then you gotta deal with it.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. And you said something. You know what? I have that experience myself where I'm like, I don't know what's going on with me. I'm not sure what is this, and you feel it wailing up, and I'm like, oh heck no! I'm talking to myself. Heck no, I'm not about to break down and cry. There's nothing really wrong. What is this feeling? I don't know why I'm feeling this way. This is weird. And then I'm looking at my husband and I'm like, I'm not sure what's happening right now. And it is true. You want to escape. I immediately get up. I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. And it's like, sometimes it comes up it happened to me one day where he was doing something on the computer and I was reading something. And as I was reading a book, and as I was reading the book, it was one of those self-help books. And I started getting kind of like, oh, I don't know. This book is making me feel some kind of way. And I'm like, let me put this down. But something else was like, keep reading. And then I put the book down after I read a little more. And then as I was sitting there quiet with nothing, I started feeling like my heart rate, like a swelling. I don't know how to describe it. It was beating a little faster. And I started feeling heavy. And then I was like, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're crying. What's going on? Why? And then he turned to look at me and I was like, I don't know what's going on. You know? So I've had that a few times where you just feel emotional or something. And then afterwards, you feel great. And you're like, I don't know what that was.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, and our instinct is to run away from that, to do
Mm-hmm.
something to escape that because we think that means there's something wrong. When in reality, if we're actually in tune, what it means is there's something that is actually coming up to be healed if you allow it to, and if you be with it instead of
Mm-hmm.
running away. And essentially, when you're running away, you're rejecting it. You're essentially trying to say, no, I'm going to put a lid on it and keep it down. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you keep it down, all you're doing is buying short-term comfort, but keeping a long-term cause of your real suffering there. So
Yep.
not actually a great trade-off at all. So one thing we
Mm-mm.
can do is start actually changing our perspective of what it means to have uncomfortable feelings within, when they arise in that way where we don't know why. We might be even just feeling a bit restless or anxious, or just angry or just dissatisfied, whatever, right? There's so many different ways of describing it. Um, but it's so helpful to just be with it for a moment before you go and escape, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
practice, just taking a bit of a pause to ask, what is this? Can I allow it to come up and just feel it, and not be afraid, even if I break down, to not be afraid, because there's a change in perspective to say, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity to heal something. So then it changes from, oh my God, what's happening, to, oh, look, here's a great opportunity. That's kind of what I've done, is I've made it like,
Yeah.
oh crap. Like right now, what happens with me, I'm kind of undergoing some really deep levels because I've been doing it for some time. And what'll happen now is I'll be in the middle of the night, literally, it'll be, let's say, midnight, I'm fast asleep, and I'll just wake up, and of course I'll be groggy because I won't know what's happening at first. And there'll be just a gigantic amount of energy coming up, literally like a volcano of uncomfortable emotion coming up right from my gut. And I'm like, I start like literally tossing and turning, like, and then I realize, oh, wait, this is an opportunity. And then I just sit really still. And the more still I am, the worse it becomes, because I'm not escaping it with any even body movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes up so strong. And I just sit with it, I be with it. And then sometimes I start doing breath work or something with it, uh, and I hold it with love. And sometimes when it's hard to just be purely with consciousness, sometimes you can speak to it in a way like, "You're welcome here. You're loved. You're forgiven. You're healed. I accept you." And like it just starts, like literally mini eruptions of release start occurring. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually a fascinating process. If you're willing to just be with it, you can do a lot of healing,
Mm-hmm.
just by that.
Yeah. I started to come to understand that as time went on.
Hmm.
My thing was that made it tough was that I was like, I don't want people to see me crying.
Yeah.
Even if it was my husband, and it's like where he's thinking, what is wrong with you? I don't know. I just was like, I honestly was that girl that was like, I need to get out of here. I need to escape.
Hmm.
And then he's looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't know what this is, you know? And so,
Yeah, but because we've been conditioned to be like that, right? We've been
yeah.
conditioned to think that, if you are experiencing this, that something is wrong,
Hmm.
and that's just not true. And especially men, if you were feeling that, imagine a man crying. Like, we have such a stigma around that. And at some point, I just lost all that, and I don't care. I'll cry deeply in front of many people.
Whoever.
And
Yes.
yeah, and I
Yes.
have in retreats where we're doing some really deep work, and I've done some stuff with psychedelics, ayahuasca, I don't know if but stuff. But like, that's crazy. Sometimes you're wailing, but you just go with it.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Is that what you were talking about when you mentioned altered states of consciousness?
Okay, yeah. Well, and I've also experienced them just through meditation and through lucid dreaming, through a lot of different things. But ayahuasca, of course, is the most intense one by far. Um, and that's something that can process a gigantic amount of shadow work in a very, very short period of time, within hours. So for me, that was kind of the biggest leap in consciousness and healing that occurred. Now, of course, I have to preface that with a kind of a disclaimer here, and to say that you can't. So ayahuasca is basically, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, it's It's a plant medicine from the Amazon originally, and it is something that's been used by tribes and the shaman that preside over them to great healing. It's a plant. It's a mix of plants that actually releases great amounts of DMT in the brain, which allows you, which essentially lifts the veil off of this reality and allows you to access other dimensions, other, crazy stuff, but in your
Yeah.
own unconscious and really hyper real ways.
I heard that you get really sick.
Yeah, you get sick, which is actually, see, here's what people go, oh, I don't want a bad trip. Well, I welcomed those because I didn't think of them as bad trips. So I went into some people were going into the ayahuasca saying, I just want to experience heavenly stuff. And I was like, give me what I need. I didn't say I want a hellish stuff. I just said, give me what I need.
Right.
And often what you need is to experience the stuff you don't want to experience. So you puke a lot, and that's purging. You purge physically. A lot of the emotions come out through literally like all this toxic stuff out of the cells literally comes up to be purged. But then you also have visions and you can purge through crying and through actually experiencing the emotions you don't want to experience. Like I did 9 different ceremonies over a period of 9 months, and I experienced emotions at such a depth of discomfort and pain that I didn't even know it was possible to feel. But having said that, when I look back, I'm so grateful because, that was a lot of stuff that was released that just wouldn't have, it would have taken years of work to release how much I did in just those few sessions. Of course, it's not for everyone. It takes a lot of courage and willingness because you have no control. When you're in it for about 6 to 8 hours, you have zero control, and you're just in it in the ride. It's like a crazy roller coaster ride that you have no control over. Now, here's what's fascinating, though. There is a form of control that's very counterintuitive, which is that the more you surrender and let go of resistance and let go of trying to control, the more pleasant the experience becomes. The easier you purge. So the first day I was puking, I had the horrible stuff occurring. The second day I learned to relax, stay with the breath instead of the mind, and kind of relax more. And I didn't puke. And for the next 8 sessions, I only puked 1 more time because I was just learning how to really just let go, and I didn't need to purge physically. Of course, I went into super deep states of consciousness that caused a lot of other challenges, but every challenge was always, it just came back to being stuck in the mind. The greatest truth I learned from all my experiences was how the mind creates all of our suffering, how believing our thoughts creates all of our suffering, when in reality, when we're not in the mind, if we're just in now, just in direct experiencing of the moment through the senses and through the subtle senses of, experiencing the peace or the joy or whatever, there's no problem and there's no issues and there's no suffering. Mm-hmm. Whenever we get into the mind and, we're in the past or in the future, inevitably, that's where all the suffering comes from.
Right.
So, and the ayahuasca experience has amplified that to such an extent that I started seeing it much more clearly.
Mm-hmm. Most people want to go for that magical experience where they feel like, oh, my veil's going to lift, and then I'm going to be in the middle of the forest with other beings that, And
there is that aspect to it. There is.
It really does happen?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I had heavenly experiences too. Stuff that is so breathtaking. I was, crying of pure joy. So it's good that you asked that so people don't think it's just this hellish thing. So there's sometimes the entire thing can be heavenly. It never was for me specifically because I asked for the deepest healing, and that usually comes with some facing the darkness first. So for me, virtually every single ceremony was the first 2-3 hours was very dark and tough dealing with that stuff, and then it would burst into this heavenly thing where I'm in this higher states of consciousness, connected with the whole universe, feeling at one with everything, getting direct insights from universal mind, crying. If you saw me, you just see me sitting there just crying tears of joy and being in awe about all the insights about the universe that I'm receiving. And probably the most fascinating one, I would say, is when I opened my eyes. I was maybe 5 hours into it or something. I opened my eyes, and this was in the Netherlands, and there they do it in broad daylight. But I opened my eyes and I look around, and everyone was me. And I don't mean me as Ziad. I don't mean they look like me. Everyone was themselves, but they were me. Like, there was only one consciousness, and I knew I was literally everyone. There was just one being here experiencing itself in infinite different ways. And I actually had written about that in my book because I deeply believed that, but I had never fully experienced it just with eyes wide open, just waking. Like, at that point, I could have normal conversations. I could just get up, walk around and talk. Nothing looked abnormal. Everything was normal, except I was perceiving every person as another version of myself, just in a different form. And
Wow.
I was just crying tears of joy and happiness and gratitude because, I mean, obviously, if everyone is you, imagine the unconditional love you feel for everyone, right? You just,
Right.
it's crazy. So, so there's definitely those beautiful experiences that come with transcending some of the darker stages at first.
When I heard that the Amazon forest was burning, I was like, oh no, because that's the only place like in that region that you could get that tea.
No, it's not. Yeah, so even in the U.S., there's a bunch of
What?
there's shaman that do it. You see, the problem is that you have to find someone that is trustworthy and that is credible and legitimate, because it has become, unfortunately, a bit of a kind of a mainstream thing where everyone wants to try it. And what that usually creates is a bunch of some that just do it for the money and they're not really equipped to properly produce the brew and also to be there as guides. And then there's actually, dark, whatever you want to call it, dark shaman that will mess with you. So you want to be very careful who or where you go and do it. The first time I did it was a place called Rhythmia in Costa Rica. So they're legitimate. They were great. And then in the Netherlands, it was a place called Sacred Voyage. Now the Netherlands has actually banned it, but they still do it in Portugal. So they're wonderful, the Sacred Voyage. They have amazing guides and very beautiful people. And so at first time, I just intuitively felt that it was the right place to go. I didn't really, honestly, do much logical research. I just kind of followed my heart, and I trusted that that was the right place to go for me. And then the second time, even actually, I had read a book written by the founder, and I just very much resonated, and just went, and it was beautiful. But there are people that can have negative experiences. So I would say, do your research, ask around, and hopefully end up with someone who knows what they're doing.
I have heard a lot of people wanting to go. So you guys got that information firsthand from someone who actually tried it and shared the experience,
Yeah, and I can't recommend it enough if someone's really interested in deep awakening and deep shadow work and all that. I think it's incredible. It takes a lot of readiness, but it's very, very much worth it. I think you can do a lot of work in a very short period of time. If you go in with that attitude, of course.
Right.
If that's what you're asking for, that's what happens.
Yeah. If you had to sum up the law of attraction, like what the formula, what would that be? Have you heard about this? Everyone's reading. They're like, okay, so if I think about this, I will attract it to me.
Yeah, I think that's incorrect. I think there's a lot of incorrect teachings about the law of attraction. And I actually have an in-depth 2-hour free class on my website, soulhub.com, where I cover just this. And now I will give you a synopsis of this. But for anyone who's really interested in this subject, it's literally a 2-hour free class on my website about manifestation, about the law of attraction, but it goes very deep into all the traps and mistakes and the true formula. But let me give you the synopsis of what it's really kind of all about here. So the issue with that is that people think, well, if I just think about what I want and I really visualize it and I really kind of hold that burning desire, then I will attract it. And I think that's, for the most part, incorrect. And the reason for that is that the truth is, you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. So this is very, very different, right? So
Wow.
what does that
Yeah.
mean? Okay, well, what that means is what you are is your state of consciousness. Okay, and what you want is simply a desire, and most often it's a desire that's coming from the mind. All right, and so, and like I had talked to you before, the mind is a bunch of conditioning and programming. So that kind of just shows you how legitimate these desires end up really being, and how they don't actually bring us the happiness that we want. So what you are is your state of consciousness. And your state of consciousness is not just what you consciously think and are trying to attract. In fact, the vast majority of what makes up your state of consciousness is actually your subconscious. And it's actually
Mm-hmm.
the subtle energy around your body, your auric field, and all that, that is vastly determined by all these subconscious processes. And that's why shadow work is actually so important. When you clean up your inner space, your state of consciousness starts literally vibrating at a higher level. And when that occurs, that's who you are, right? You are a being of a higher consciousness, and that's what you start attracting to you. Now, if you just want something and you just sit there, focus on it, focus on it, focus on it, one of two things is going to happen. One is that you will not get it. Why? Because even though you're consciously focusing on it, there's so many limiting beliefs and there's so much stuff deep down that is actually blocking you, because that's what you truly are, quote unquote, in terms of a state of consciousness. And that's what you're vibrating out into your subtle energy field. And that's what is actually being picked up, regardless of what your conscious thoughts are, right? And number two, you may actually attract it and get it if you have a laser-like focus on your conscious. But what'll happen is it won't actually bring you the fulfillment that you thought it would, because you still have all this other stuff that was actually driving the desire to begin with that you have not healed. And so you think, oh, this new car is going to make me happy, when in reality, the only reason you're desiring it is because you have this feeling of a sense of lack, because, for instance, you feel a certain sense of unworthiness, and that's coming from your childhood, and you didn't actually look at that. You see, so there's a much greater depth to it. That's number one. Number two, the reason why you also don't attract what you want, but instead what you are, is because when you are wanting something, by definition, the very act of wanting and desiring something is stating that I do not have it. So it's an affirmation of lack. You are in the present affirming a sense of lack, if you're doing it in a grasping type of way, which is usually how most of our desires are. So you're affirming a sense of lack, and then you're wondering why you're not getting it. Why? Because what you're putting out to the universe is, I want this. Therefore, what you're putting out is, I do not have this. I do not have this. That's what you are as a state of consciousness. So if you were instead to put out, I am this already, and start feeling that, right? And start
Mm-hmm.
experiencing that, now you're not putting out a state of lack. You're putting out a positive affirmation of your beingness. And it takes some time for that to change your state of consciousness, to resonate with that, and then you can experience it more. But then I will add one thing. On the deepest levels, often our desires, like I mentioned, are not what will truly fulfill us, because most of them come from the mind. And it's really only when we start learning to drop into the heart, and here I mean spiritual heart, or our soul essence, that we start tapping into the desires that will actually fulfill us if we get them. You know, how many times have we wanted something so bad, got it, we're happy a little bit, and then we're unhappy again, we want the next thing. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
reason that happens is the reason you were happy when you got it is not because you got it. It's not because of the thing. It's because temporarily you ceased to desire. That's why you were happy. The desiring was creating all the unhappiness, because by definition you were rejecting the moment, and you're not being here and now and happy. Now, people sometimes worry about that and say, well, if I don't desire, how can I get a better life? How can things improve? How, what are you telling me, to just be passive? No, that's a misinterpretation of it. What I'm saying is that you can have soul-based desires, but they don't feel like a rejection of the present, like a being dissatisfied with the now and thinking that when I get this, I'll be happy. That's the trap, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The soul-based
Absolutely.
desire is, I am enough as it is now. I am happy now. And from that resonance with my true nature, with my soul essence, from that, the desire is to manifest an outward reflection of that. And so because of that, since you already are that, there's no grasping. You're just doing it for the joy of manifesting a reflection of that in the world. And it's a very different way to go about things. It just, in the first part, you're unhappy, waiting for your desire. You get it, you temporarily happy because it ceases, and then another one comes up because you haven't really gotten anything truly meaningful. Whereas in the latter, you're experiencing your true happiness at your core by tapping into the truth of your being as consciousness, and then from that, manifesting a reflection of that into the world that is not a grasping type of thing for the future to make you happy. It's just a joyful flow from who you truly are into the world. So that's those are my, kind of condensed thoughts about the law of attraction.
I thought that was a good way of describing or explaining it. You did good.
Oh,
What?
good.
Tell me your website again.
So it's soulhub.com. SOUL hub.
Okay.
HUB.com.
I even like the name of the website. That's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
I have one more question for you that I'd like
Sure.
to ask. What is your opinion of affirmations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think they can work if you truly, deeply believe what you're saying. Now, the problem is that it's often very difficult to do so. So, for instance, let's say you don't have much money, right? And you are saying, I am abundant, or I am financially abundant, but you really don't feel it because you look around and you don't have much money, for instance, right? So it's not going to be very effective because your subconscious is saying, well, no, it's not true. So I recently discovered a way to do affirmations that I found to be much more powerful than the typical way affirmations are given. And the way I discovered is, instead of affirming things like, for instance, I am free, I am abundant, I am healthy, I am all these things, affirm qualities of being instead. So instead of I am abundant, I am abundance. Instead of I am free, I am freedom. Instead of I am peaceful, I am peace. Now, why? What does this mean? It's not just a change semantically. It's actually a huge thing. What it means is, the former, when you're saying those things, you are identifying as the person, and this is what we started our conversation at, as the body mind, right? And you're saying, I am these things, okay? And the person is a very limited construct. And the person is, riddled with all the mind stuff that makes us suffer. So you're kind of reinforcing that identification of limitation by default. Even if you're saying I am free, first, if you're not really totally free, you don't actually feel it. And then second, you're saying I am a person, I'm a body, I'm a mind that is free. So it's already a limitation. Whereas if you say I am freedom as an affirmation, or I am limitlessness, or I am abundance, or I am love itself, or whatever, those are qualities of being of your true nature, of that formless awareness or that consciousness that you are. So by definition, you're instantly identifying with who you truly are instead of the vehicle, the costume of the person. So that right there instantaneously makes them much more powerful just for that. It taps you into the true nature, your true soul essence, so to say. So that's number one. And then number two, when you say them, right? So if you say, for instance, let's say, I am abundance. Now, regardless if you have financial abundance in your life or anything, you can feel abundance as a state of being, which means just a fullness of spirit. You can feel love as a state of being, even if you don't have love in your life, let's say as a relationship. You can always feel a state of being as your own quality of existence, any aspect of it. They're like different facets of a diamond, let's say. One side is love, one side is joy, one side is bliss, one side is abundance, one side is freedom. And you can tap into them. Just that word evokes what that feeling is like. And you let yourself kind of melt out of the body, so to say, expand beyond the body, and experience yourself as peace, as love. Not as a person who has peace, who has love, but as the being, the quality of being itself. And that is a much more powerful way to work with affirmations, because that actually changes your whole vibration of your whole auric field, everything around you. And that actually starts translating into more of that in your life. So you kind of go to the higher aspect first.
Wow. Thank you. I love it.
Cool.
That was
Yeah,
good.
it just kind of came to me about a month ago. That one just kind of seemingly out of the blue. So I just started doing it, and it was powerful.
Do you mentor people?
I don't do it one-on-one or anything like that personally. I do have a couple courses, very in-depth courses. I have a partner on SoulHub who himself is like a 20-year student of these things, but he's much more on the scientific level. And so we kind of complement that. He's like a physicist and he does a lot of deep science, and I do the deep spirituality. So we bring them together. And he does the science of spirit. So it's not just like physics, but we bring it together, and to have something that's extremely practical. And we've created a lot of our own techniques, such as these that are very practical, and our own shadow work techniques, our own belief change techniques, and things of that nature. So we have a couple, and meditation techniques that go much deeper than, most normal ways people meditate. And so we have created a couple in-depth courses that people can choose to sign up to. And we've wanted to do something cool with that, which is usually these types of things, in the industry, they're usually sold anywhere between a few $100, maybe $1,000 if they're very in-depth, many videos. But what we've done, we wanted to reach the most number of people possible. So we've actually created, or trying to pioneer, this new thing, which is kind of a choose your own price type thing, starting with some very low prices, just to allow people anyone who wants to do deep inner work to be able to afford it. So people get to choose based on what they afford, and hopefully people who can afford more pay more, so that helps us spread the work to more people. So that's kind of where we're going. And if someone's interested, they can watch the free webinar, and at the end of that, after we've taught a lot of stuff, they can have an option to potentially join one of those courses.
I think I've seen that there was a quiz to help people to know what was right
and there's
for
also
them too.
and there's also a quiz. So there's two key courses that we have. One about spiritual awakening through meditation, one about through manifestation, like the law of attraction stuff we've talked about. But if someone doesn't really know which path is right for them, they can just scroll down and there's a quiz at the bottom. They can take that, and that's been proven to be very accurate to tell them kind of which level they're at and what would be more right for them, so to say. And so they can do that too. And a lot of people just know what they want. They'll just say, okay, I want meditation, I want this. So they'll just do that directly. I
really enjoyed talking with you.
Me too. Those are great questions.
I expected it was going to really be great. And I was like, I think it is.
I didn't really mention what my book was about. So my book, Reality Unveiled, which is on Amazon, and I even have priced the Kindle at 99 cents. Like I didn't write it to try to make money. I wanted people to really benefit from it, so anyone can afford it. Audible is much more expensive because I don't actually own the rights. I sold that to Audible. But having said that, the book is really about putting all the puzzle pieces together from so many various different vantage points about what existence is all about. What happens after we die, from various different forms of research. What about extraterrestrial stuff? What about extra dimensional stuff? What's the purpose of life? All these different things we might have heard bits and pieces here and there, don't know how they fit all together. What I've done in that book is kind of bring the puzzle pieces together so it makes sense to people. And since that time, I've gotten like literally hundreds of emails from people saying, this just clicked and it changed my life, and I finally have this much deeper sense of purpose and things of that nature. So so I just wanted to explain what it's about if people would be interested in that too, other than the stuff on SoulHub.
All right. So we have Reality Unveiled, and we can get that on Amazon. We can get that book on Kindle, and we can also get the book on Audible.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have YouTube, and your YouTube channel is called SoulHub.
Mm-hmm.
And then the website
And then there's just the website, soulhub.com. Yeah.
Okay, got it. What are you on Instagram?
Instagram is actually my name. So I'm at Ziad Masri _official. It's a little long, but everything was taken. I was very late to join the Instagram game. So
thank you, Ziad, for coming on Authentic Talks. I really enjoyed the conversation. We talked about so many things, you guys. You heard it all. We talked about breath work, shadow work, ayahuasca. We also talked about spiritual awakening and what it really means, what the deep awakening is all about. We talked about limiting beliefs and law of attraction, as well as affirmations. You guys check Ziad out on his website, as well as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. He also has courses that he offers on his website. All right, you guys, what an amazing show. You guys take care, be safe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Shanta with Authentic Talks.